All right, so today it's the River Elbe behind me here, flowing through the beautiful city of Dresden, Germany. And we're going to talk a little about digestion and metabolism. Of course, those two topics are linked together anyway. And again, these are very just short, brief overviews of these systems, just enough so we can understand what's going on with the age-related changes. And so I start here by kind of starting where the food goes in the mouth and then following it down. And so we start with the oral cavity, right, where we put in our food and we chew it up. So we refer to that as mechanical digestion because we're breaking the food down into little itty bitty bits, and then we can swallow. The pharynx, or the back of your throat, there are muscles there, skeletal muscle and smooth muscle, to assist with swallowing, helping to push that food down. And then it goes down into the esophagus, which is really just there to really transport food down to the stomach, and it's going to pass through the diaphragm and then link up to the stomach. And this will be important to understand for some of the disorders that we will mention. And at the inferior end of that esophagus is called the lower esophageal sphincter, or I learned at once upon a time is the cardiac sphincter. And this sphincter, as we swallow, will relax and open up and allow the food to come down into the stomach. The rest of the time, that sphincter is held tight so that as the stomach is turning around food, it won't push it up backwards back into the esophagus again. The stomach does a variety of things, but the only two that I've listed here are that it secretes hydrochloric acid, which is important because there are many things that will dissolve way better in acid than they will just in, chopped up and placed in water. And it also mixes the food up. And so it's mixing it all with that hydrochloric acid as well as a few other things. Well, from the stomach, the food moves down into the small intestine. And the small intestine is actually divided into three sections. But we're just going to talk in general about the small intestine. And this is primarily where chemical digestion takes place, where there's enzymes that are going to be secreted in there, activated, and then they act on all of these biomolecules to break them down into shorter segments. For instance, proteins get broken into individual amino acids. Fats are emulsified and broken down into smaller components. And carbohydrates are broken into monosaccharides, because we can't absorb things that are too large through the cells and then eventually into the blood. They have to be smaller, so they're all broken down and digested this way. In addition to the chemical digestion, the small intestine is also where we absorb nutrients. Some other organs, now the food does not pass through these organs, but they assist. The liver has an important role in that it makes bile. And it makes bile. That bile gets down and gets stored in the gallbladder, although you can live without one because the liver will still secrete and it can still go into the small intestine. And then that bile, after you eat a meal, will move down into the small intestine. It emulsifies the fats, or kind of breaks them up, because fats don't like to dissolve in a aqueous environment. It helps to make that work just a little bit better. And that'll allow the fats to be digested. The pancreas also has an important role in that it secretes both digestive enzymes and bicarbonate into the small intestine. So these enzymes, of course, are really important for chemical digestion, and that bicarbonate helps to neutralize all of that acid that came from the stomach. So that bicarbonate is also important. The small intestine itself also will secrete quite a bit of bicarbonate. After passing through the small intestine, the digested food will move into the large intestine, or sometimes just referred to as the colon, and we know there's different sections of it. Well, the most important thing that happens here from our perspective is that it reabsorbs water. There are a few other things that take place, and you'll have some reading assignments related to the microbiome. And that relates to that, refers to the bacteria here, because the bacteria in the large intestine can digest things like fiber that otherwise would not get digested, and you wouldn't pull any nutrition out of them. But the bacteria can actually help you do that. So we have this symbiotic relationship with the bacteria in our large intestine, as well as actually in other places of the body. A few other terms here that may be important. Peristalsis. This is a wave of contraction, and they actually will travel down the esophagus, they travel down the stomach, they travel down the small intestine, they travel down the large intestine. And this is how these waves of contraction, how we propel that digesting food to make sure it moves along the GI tract. Okay, there's another little fact here that I've just put in. I don't go into a lot of information, but insoluble dietary fiber. There's soluble fiber, there's insoluble fiber. The insoluble fiber usually comes from plant material, and the amount we eat is related to better colon health. Regular exercise is also related to better colon health. Both of these help to improve colonic peristalsis, and which also improves colon health. So the idea is to have more fiber and exercise, and then you'll have a healthier colon. I'm not going to go into more detail than that, but I like students to understand there's a connection between these different things, because I think probably the most neglected nutrient in the American diet is dietary fiber. Unless you're eating a lot of vegetables and whole grains, you are probably not getting sufficient fiber. Finally, how are nutrients absorbed? Some nutrients are going to go, this says directly into blood. Really what happens is they get absorbed from the small intestine into the cells lining the small intestine, and then those cells will pass it into the blood. Okay? Well, the nutrients that go directly into the blood then actually passes through the liver before it goes anywhere else. And I always like to explain it that actually gives the liver first crack at any nutrients, because the liver is involved with a lot of things related to digestion and metabolism. Well, what nutrients get absorbed directly into the blood? Monosaccharides, so your sugars, amino acids, minerals, because they're all water soluble, and water-soluble vitamins, which is all of your B vitamins as well as vitamin C. These are all water-soluble, right? So that's one way that nutrients are absorbed. The other way that nutrients are absorbed is into the lymph and the lymphatic system. And when it goes into the lymphatic system, it does not go anywhere near the blood. It actually gets dumped back into the systemic circulation, where the lymphatic system actually empties into the blood, actually up near your collarbones. Well, what kind of nutrients get absorbed into the lymph? Well, it's the lipids. Why do the lipids go there instead of the blood? I can't tell you. But what happens is these lipids, which includes triglycerides, cholesterol, and any fat-soluble vitamins, which are A, D, E, and K, they actually get packaged into what's called a chylomicron, which kind of has a protein coat, and that helps to keep it water-soluble so it can actually be transported. But then it gets transported in the lymph rather than in the blood. All right, finally, I have cholesterol on here. And this is just a brief cholesterol primer, but gives you a little bit better idea of the different types of cholesterol and why they're called that and how they work. All right, so our first cholesterol is going to be the VLDL, very low density lipoproteins. Now you think of the difference between lipids and protein. Lipids are less dense. Proteins are more dense. So when it's very low density, that means it has a lot of lipids in it, okay? Well, these VLDLs are made by the liver, and they're very high in triglycerides. In fact, we take usually this is a little overstatement here, but liver takes any excess calories that you eat, converts them to triglycerides, which are fat, and then sends them out in these VLDLs so that they can be stored in fat cells, or it's sometimes taken elsewhere as well. Well, once it's dumped off those triglycerides at those cells, it becomes an LDL. Well, LDL is the bad cholesterol. There was cholesterol up here in the VLDL as well, but we got rid of the triglycerides. All we have left is the cholesterol. Okay. Well, so the LDLs are high in cholesterol, and it is actually taking the cholesterol around to places in the body that need it. So that's natural. And when they actually bind to their receptors, and they're actually taken inside the cell. So the LDLs, that's the way that we get rid of them. And of course, the problem is if there's too many of them in circulation in the blood, which can happen for some different reasons. All right, now we have the HDL. The HDL is the good cholesterol, high density lipoprotein. High density because there's not fat in it, right? It's more protein than fat. These are also made by the liver, and their job is to go around and pick up any excess cholesterol in the arteries but left by the LDL, and so it shouldn't be there. And then it returns back to the liver for processing again. And so if the HDL is basically clearing the extra cholesterol out of the arteries, and that's why it is the good cholesterol.